Greetings, fellow Americans. Susanna for President 2028. Welcome to the 2025 edition of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Fireside Chats. We've seen these executive orders for the degradation of the DEI programs across the board. I mean, that's like one of his biggest things. And I was watching just prior to getting on here, I was watching a clip of an interview that Tim Walz was doing with MSNBC, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the link for it. Saved the video, and he laid it out just like I'm going to say. It's been laid out in Project 2025. I have a copy of the document. If you've read the document, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's a bit long.
It is.
800 pages, but I have a copy of it.
Yeah, but what's really awesome is on, if you've got the PDF format.
Mm-hmm. I do.
I do too, which is pretty handy. You can use the search bar to search for specific words, phrases, all that stuff, so you can relatively quickly find some information that you need throughout there. So I really like that feature about those types of documents. You can search. And that's actually how I discovered that this implementation of the DEI programs being completely depleted, wiped out, is throughout the entire government system that he wants to implement this. And I'm like, I think we both know that those programs were implemented to help us ensure the equality of our people, the equality of our citizens. Because we have a larger ratio of, this is going to sound racist, white people to other shades of skin color. Because that's really what it is. There is a larger ratio there. So making sure that those programs are helping people who are less likely to get in because of that ratio has really helped a lot of people in this nation. And I've seen it. I know people who've been through those programs. So I know I want to see with this, I want to see people going after him legally, like filing those lawsuits and pressing their state governments to do something more instead of just focusing on the immigration issue, because really what he's doing is violating all of our rights, not just a few people. And that's where a lot of where I think a lot of confusion is, and where where a lack of action is, especially by our Congress. And I don't know about you, but I've always thought that when one branch tries to violate our constitutional rights, the other branches need to check them. They need to balance our government again and not play along with it. And that's exactly what they're doing, just playing along. It really is disturbing to see, I think.
Absolutely.
We definitely have solutions, I think, to combat this stuff. I would love to hear some more of what you and I have talked about already, definitely, and any suggestions we can throw out there to the people, get them started with it. I think that's going to be really important and beneficial to everyone, for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I really appreciate, Susanna, your addressing these issues head on, and this is the time for it, since Project 2025, which Tom Homan and John Radcliffe were actually central in, now in ICE and CIA, and basically trying to implement internally this whole new restructuring of the federal government, in blatant violation, obviously, of the Constitution and also accepted practice and federal law. But it's not a secret. It was very well planned out. And it really, I would describe it as an attempt to restructure the United States to reflect actual financial interests, i.e., that the control in an absolute sense should be by those who control money and who can control assets, as opposed to citizens in accord with a constitution or some sort of a contract between the citizens and the government. And that is an extremely dangerous maneuver. It seems to me they're quite serious about it, and that we should also be serious in our response. This discussion here is to talk specifically about what we can do. I tend to fall back on Frederick Douglass, who has been one of my sort of heroes in this respect in his efforts, not only to address the issue of slavery, which is quite similar to what we're looking at now. I mean, this is potentially a drive towards slavery, moving from illegal immigrants to legal immigrants to marginal citizens to you and me, in a way to reduce our rights. And Frederick Douglass said in that campaign against slavery, which, by the way, at the time in the South was expanding to include independent farmers, right? That by the 1850s, the state governments were starting to chip away at the rights of independent farmers. So to use slavery as a way to essentially reduce all farmers or all workers to a slave state. And so Frederick Douglass said, power never concedes anything without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And so first making the demand that whatever that may be, we can discuss what that would be, and then moving forward with it. We obviously can't, one or two people can't change the world, but we can set the direction, and we should assume that having a scientific basis, having a basis in tradition and law and the Constitution, and having an ethical basis is trumps other things, you might say. It's not so important to gather large amount of money from corporate sources in order to get on the internet if that means that you have compromised your most fundamental foundations for your movement.
That's definitely very true. I agree with you on those points. I think I've seen a lot of that I think I've seen a lot of those actions in our news media and headlines that I'm getting, and now one of the most recent ones is that he has fired multiple people from the FBI.
Right.
So we're seeing examples of him trying to take total control, but really what he's doing is trying to assert powers that the president doesn't actually have.
Correct.
So my question is, how do we get Congress to get those pieces of legislation onto the floor to stop him from doing this, to say, right, we condemn this is unconstitutional, we will not support it.
Right.
Especially when there are so many Republicans who completely support this and are really in turn violating their own rights.
Correct. Right. I mean, in a way, it's tragic. Maybe it's predictable. If you have a republic, I mean, as Benjamin Franklin said, it's nice to have a republic if you can keep it. And we have been around for 250 years, so it's, in a way, it's inevitable that we would reach such a crisis in the course of events. But on the specific issue of what do we do, first, I think we have to assume that raising money to elect people is not the first priority. The first priority is to speak the truth about what's really happening in the United States, and to talk about how our country, what defines what our country is, what the United States is, and what the government is and what it's not. And this is something we can debate, since there's a whole spectrum about how you approach this. But I would say we only need one person in Congress, one single individual like yourself, who's willing to stand up and say that this whole procedure is illegal, right, from the beginning, or that these institutions have been profoundly corrupted, whether it's by Citizens United ruling or others that have essentially made lobbying and PACs, super PACs, the major players in policy. So we don't really have congressmen or congresswomen anymore. That really, we have to start there. That the Trump administration, and to go specifically FBI and now and CIA, there is an effort to completely turn them into sort of the attack dogs of the executive. And this is a shift that would continue on, obviously, beyond Donald Trump. Could be a permanent shift in the nature of governance. At the same time, I think we do have to recognize that in these institutions, in the sort of security, defense swamp, there has been profound corruption, especially over the last 20 years. And we can talk about that specifically because it is a sensitive issue. Some people are not quite ready to address. But I personally feel it has to be addressed. That we do, at the one hand, have to say that what Donald Trump is doing is illegal and unethical and dangerous for us, the citizens, because he's moving to mobilize the military against citizens, starting with immigrants, right? Illegal immigrants, then immigrants, and then you and I. But this is made possible by deep institutional corruption that goes back, I would say, at least 30 years, but it has become particularly bad basically since 2001.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can see that being a turning point as well. We had, because I think a lot of it had to do with 9/11 at that point, but
Well, it started
they
before
just, they
9/11, in
could
my
have,
opinion. But
yeah,
9/11 was it was, some people say it's the beginning of it. Some people say
like
it's the result of it. But
I want to
that was
say
the key moment.
I want to say it's more like the catalyst.
Yeah, good way to put it.
Yeah, the catalyst. But with issues that happened regarding, regarding those particular types of incidences, like the attack on 9/11, the
Mm-hmm.
government could have made many different decisions that included us. Even with the prison program, asking us, would have been better than just doing it behind our backs. And that's,
Right.
examples of how other administrations violate our constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
And it's become worse, and significantly worse, especially with Donald Trump.
Right.
So,
So from a constitutional perspective, I mean, the Constitution, what I really appreciate about your approach, Susanna, and why I'm looking forward to working together with you, is this idea that the United States of America is defined by the Declaration of Independence and by the Constitution. And these two texts contain within them enough to actually give us legitimacy to say, this is what the United States is. And these institutions that we're up against, these paper tigers, are not the United States of America as defined by the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. And specifically, we're talking about, I would start with foreign influence. It's not limited to foreign influence, so let's start with that because that's the most blatant violation. So we now have all these foreign countries, foreign companies, foreign individuals who pour money into lobbying and making our government. I mean, not only lobbying in Congress, but now bribing public officials and engaging in campaigns by third parties, by NGOs, by lobbying firms, by PR firms. And then we have these multinational corporations, which are supposedly American, like Google or Oracle or Facebook or others. Often these so-called American companies are not headquartered in the United States. They're legal entities outside the United States. They don't pay taxes in many cases. The main company itself, the corporation, and they use and their interests are not the United States. So a company like Google, obviously, it has a large American stock ownership in it, but it makes its decisions based on its global assessment. And I would say under the Trump administration now, that it seems pretty clear that multinational banks and to some degree multinational corporations have made a cold, uh, objective assessment that they can make more money by tearing the United States apart and selling it off as at fire sale prices than they can on keeping it together. And so they've essentially made this cold calculation. So these multinational corporations, billionaires behind them, behind trusts, multinational banks, who are basically giving policy, feeding policy to our congressmen, they're not American. That would be, and the Constitution doesn't defend them. And this, of course, goes back to the issue of corporations, right? Are corporations people? Do they have a right to lobby? Do they have a right to see congressmen? As you know, you and I would have incredible trouble seeing our own congressmen. But if you're a lobbyist for a multinational corporation, you can see them basically anytime. And the two big lobbies, the biggest lobbies right now, both of which are dragging us by the nose towards war, is AIPAC for Israel and the Taiwan lobby, which spread hundreds of millions of dollars around to alter American policy and to get us involved with things which aren't necessarily our problem.
Yeah, they're unfortunately whenever they start doing that, it's to me it seems like they start to mess with our economy that way, because then all of a sudden we have our tax dollars being pushed up, being pushed somewhere else. It's not going to what we need in our
Absolutely.
nation to reduce homelessness, to reduce,
Right.
hunger, to reduce costs of living in general, to make sure that all of our citizens have what they need, including shelter and warm blankets, clothing, all
Absolutely.
that stuff. So, so would you say, you mentioned that there's been some debate about corporations and how they're identified.
Right.
So, this is just from my perspective how I view things. When it comes to corporations, they are business entities. They can't be considered
Right.
an individual, because a corporation is made up of many individuals. It's made up of usually many smaller businesses. And so it's a parent company that monitors other businesses, basically. And they don't do a very good job of it. I've worked for corporations before. I'm sure you have too, and they just don't really do a very good job of it.
Right.
And a lot of them have really poor policies, and those policies affect our economy as well, because they affect the
Absolutely.
people that work hourly wages for small salaries and union workers and such like that. And
Absolutely.
having, yeah, I used to work for a company that hired union workers, and I submitted a little bit of a lengthy resignation because I was not going to work for a company that had such poor policies.
Right.
So
Right.
it's, and I'm not the only person who has done stuff like that. There are people who just walk off the job because of it, and this is all affecting our economy. All of it
Right.
is.
Right.
So being able to take
Absolutely.
care of our people in many different ways, including, redirecting the funds that are being shoved to other countries, that unnecessarily are being shoved to other countries. That's
Right.
really going to benefit our people.
Right. Right. I mean
Yeah.
that issue of funding. I mean, both the money that we're spending abroad or to support. I mean, the federal government subsidizes uh, multinational corporations whose stockholders are not necessarily Americans, and if they are
Mhm.
Americans, are not necessarily interested in America, uh, and also often does all their manufacturing and other activities outside the United States, often benefiting from exploiting the United States. And this is what Trump got right. I mean, he got half of the story right. His solution was
Mhm.
totally wrong, but he obviously was appealing to a reality. And the other part of that has to do with the way the American economy has become. I mean, they use this term, I think it was made up, protectionist. that you're like an evil protectionist if you think things should be made in America or that we should grow our own food or et cetera. Um, and Donald Trump's used this term a lot. He's not interested at all, actually, not making things in America per se. It's a very effective way to get through what he wants. But I think America would do well to grow its own food. I think that the biggest opportunities economically is to go back to family farming. The United States has enormous assets in terms of land and agriculture. And it's unfortunately multinational corporations basically printing up money out of nowhere by their control of the Federal Reserve have bought up all this land and converted it to factory farms. Now just GMOs sprayed with all sorts of pesticides, really horrible. I was at University of Illinois in Urbana, Champaign, and I watched, what was happening around me at that time. This is, a while ago, but how family farms were sort of destroyed and how they put up these big they grew feed corn basically, which is inedible, all GMO, and it really destroyed the whole economy. So the United States has become dependent, been made artificially dependent on international trade in a way which is very destructive. So I don't support that. And I think the Constitution and the founding fathers and the whole tradition was based on this idea that we would be self-sufficient, that we'd be self-sufficient units.
Yeah, that is what I got from learning about the Constitution, all of its history, the founding fathers. That is also what I got from it. And I believe that we can make ourselves a self-sustaining nation. And it's going to take a lot of work. We know it is, but as long as we know what to do, we know what the steps are to get to that point, we can do it. We can accomplish it. So, one of the things that you were talking about, it's a lot to take in. I tell you,
No
it's a lot
problem.
to take
Well, I
in.
appreciate you having this chance to speak and to speak with the American people about where we really are.
Yeah. So you speaking about the family farming, I think that's actually a really good integration that we need to have. But I think it does need to be balanced with a bit of our larger corporations from, the United States growing our food for us. It, if we're exporting it, that's great, as long as we are also making sure that our people are fed too, and making sure that we have what we need all around.
Right, right,
Um, and also, and not just necessarily for, the consumption of the food, but making sure that workers have a place that they can go for, you know,
right,
for jobs, for those types of jobs, farm
right,
workers, and uh, oh man, there's all kinds of names for farm hands. You've got field workers, you've got
right,
your truck drivers, and all of it is a major part of our infrastructure.
right,
So, uh, making sure that we have all of that stuff in place, that's going to be really important. Making sure we have all of the
right,
policies in place, making sure that people have those opportunities, and making sure that they're open not just for uh, immigrants. I know that there are a lot of problems with immigration, and
right,
people want to say that they're taking American jobs, but Americans don't really want to work those jobs. And
right,
there's a very few people that I know that actually do work on like farms and
right,
fields and stuff
right.
like that. It is mostly immigrants.
Well,
So
I'm thinking maybe let's divide. Maybe let's talk a little bit about technology and how things are run, and then talk about immigration because they're slightly different topics. But I want to say just a word about technology, if you don't mind, uh, and that is that technology offers enormous potential for what we can do, and we should obviously take advantage of it in a constructive way.
mhm,
However, basic technologies like farming, right, using organic farming, using renewable uh, sources of fertilizer, and also, seeds which have been modified, and making things like pots or iron or furniture at the local level. is good. It actually keeps the money in your local economy. And the current system, every time you buy something, right? 30% of this goes to stockholders around the world. It doesn't go to your local economy at all, and that is something we really have to think about seriously. But at the same time, technology can be used in a very effective way, but we need to have a more scientific assessment and say that, for example, I mean, people use the term AI. This is now going to be a big issue going forward. AI is a very ambiguous term. It's not really clear what it means. Some people seem to be implying we have to, everything has to be online. It's like compelled by God or by, some natural evolution, which is totally untrue. But some aspects of supercomputing can be used in an effective and helpful way to understand the universe in a scientific sense.
Yeah.
But it can also be used to track people and emotionally manipulate them, and that's what's happening now. So most of those computer banks, farms owned by Amazon or Google or Oracle, are being used to dumb down the population, to sort of induce robotic thinking and short-term perspectives, and violate our constitutional rights to be self-sufficient citizens.
Yeah, I have heard also um, some things like in some states it's illegal to, or it was at least at one point in time illegal to collect stuff like rainwater and
Mm,
whatnot,
yeah,
and does apply to that, to what you're talking about, because that is one of the ways that we can help with our water supply, and
absolutely.
individually making sure that our gardens our yards are watered regardless of how we have them. It's a garden, it's a just grass, whatever.
Right.
All of it helps. All of it helps in preventative measures. All of it helps to make sure that we stabilize our economy. And unfortunately, right now, everything is in an uproar. So we got to plan to make sure that we can
Absolutely.
bring it
I
back
think,
down to where it needs to be.
I mean, water is a perfect example of that. Plastic is another one. And the Democratic and Republican parties, the so-called opposition, are both, I mean, deep into this on both sides. And we saw in the case of California, I mean, both Republicans and Democrats are connected to various different special interests interested in privatizing water, selling it. And this is a global effort, right, to privatize water. In a similar way that in order to keep oil prices up, we're being force-fed plastic. I mean, whether you like it or not, plastic is showing up everywhere. Things you don't want wrapped in plastic, you have to get wrapped in plastic. You can't do without plastic. But in the 1960s, there wasn't any plastic. I mean, people managed to live a very happy life without wrapping everything in plastic. It's being forced on us. And that really is a terrible violation of our rights.
Yeah, and unfortunately, scientifically speaking, I do keep up with that stuff as well. They have found plastic in human blood. They
Hmm.
are finding plastic in our aquatic animals, in their bloodstreams and such. So, yeah, that's something that that's not good for us. It's not good for our
No,
environment. We gotta change it, and we have to come up with the solutions to change it.
right.
And getting those ideas out there, that's going to be really important. Getting those ideas from the public is going to be really important because there's a lot of smart people out there. We just got to find them.
Well, this is how we start. This is how we start, and just sort of say things as they are, and not. I mean, the political system now is set up so that if you want to run for office, the first whatever 6 months of your campaign, you spend basically flattering rich people. I mean, that's how campaigns are run. You
Yeah.
don't spend it thinking about what's wrong with the country. You don't spend it coming up with solutions. You don't spend it talking to experts about what we need to do or trying to organize citizens. In fact, if you try and organize citizens, this is like a mark against you. I mean, they hate that. They hate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, really quick, like I just want to let you know we have about 3.5 minutes left.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, they do not like that. And I have found that I think I have evidence of this. I feel like I'm being blocked a lot on my social media posts, especially
Hmm.
like on Facebook and
Hmm.
on X,
Right.
because I oftentimes don't get as many views as I used to for
Right.
different posts. And so that I'm not the only person that has happened to. I think that happens to a lot of people who try to push for peace, who
Absolutely.
try to gather us together, like you say. They just don't like it, and we're gonna have to
Right.
push back really hard if we want peace. We're gonna have to take it, unfortunately.
Well, it's going to require some pain, and when I say pain in a psychological sense, a lot of people don't really want to think seriously about how the United States is being governed. And the sad truth is that through the Department of Defense, through the intelligence community, through expanded homeland security, increasingly we have the domestic political discourse is limited. There are large budgets in Homeland Security for anti-disinformation, which are then farmed out to companies like Sassy or Booz Allen Hamilton, who then exactly what you're describing, limit your circulation. They don't necessarily threaten you, but they make sure you don't have impact. And they sometimes will even engage in sort of backstabbing efforts to distance you from your friends or to circulate rumors around you. And this is all blatantly unconstitutional. So it's not really helpful to just complain about conspiracies. I don't advocate that at all. But I think it is helpful to say this is what's happening. It's unconstitutional. It's not permissible. And although we may be dismissed in the first round, that if we can continue it, that we will I think, make that progress. In the same way, in the argument on slavery, I mean, in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, although slavery was a serious problem in the United States, there was an intentional effort to leave racist ideology out of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And that was not an accident. There was really a belief that there was this potential in the United States. But it would take, you know, 100 years to get to the next step. And of course, we're still working towards a more perfect union.
Absolutely, that we definitely are. Well, we are out of time, so thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I do look forward to talking with you again.
Thank
So
you very much.
you're very welcome. Thank you for your time, and may our path lead to peace and prosperity.
Together. Thank you very much.